Hi, Kirstin.
Hello, so nice to see you again.
Oh, and thank you. We're both taking time out of the summer holidays, although we don't get to have a holiday, do you, when you're a working parent?
No, in fact, it's harder work, isn't it? When got all the other things to juggle. I've just thrown some sausages and chips and things in the oven and they're sorting themselves out.
Excellent. Okay, so we met when I came across you through a feature called Woman of the Week that a company called Leader Market does, and I thought, oh my goodness, I have you on the podcast. So I know a bit about you, but some of the listeners may not. So for the listeners today and the listeners to come, could you please share your full name and what it is that you do today?
Thank you. My name is Kirstin Coughtrie, and I am the founder and the Chief Innovation Architect for Gaia Learning, an online school that specializes in helping neurodivergent children thrive in their education.
Fantastic. I'm so glad to have you on the Challenging University podcast because regular listeners will know that lots of the guests that come on did not go to uni, and the other guests that come on run organisations which help people to access either careers or education paths who may not be able to go through the standard school, college, uni route. And you kind of fit into that second camp with Gaia Learning.
Yeah, definitely. We have a lot of our students who are not only neurodivergent, but come to us through the alternative education provision market, where schools use us to help improve their learners' attendance and also their outcomes when they find it difficult to get into traditional school environments. We support them to, in some cases, help learners back into a traditional setting, but for some of them, learning online in a more flexible, personalized way is something that really works for them, and they stay with us full time and long term. So
Fantastic. I'm very excited to get into kind of the details of this. Before we get right into what Gaia is all about and how you come to set it up, tell me a little bit about your experiences of education. What was secondary school like for you?
So I started secondary school as a newly arrived South African in the UK when I was 11. So that was quite a challenging time to move countries and establish myself in a new education system, fresh with a much thicker South African accent than I think I now have, and bringing with me lots of ideas about, well, a different kind of schooling or attitude to schooling than that I found when I arrived here. So, for a lot of students that we support now, the transition to secondary school can be traumatic anyway. But I found that very intensely so. I'd been at what was one of the probably the best schools in South Africa. It was an all-girls school. I wore my uniform correctly. It was very strict. And there's also a difference in the school year. It's a January to December in South Africa. So moving into the sort of September, I'd come part way. So I actually hadn't finished my junior school by the time I was sort of thrown into secondary school.
Yeah.
But saying that, because the education system was different, I was actually ahead of my peers here in the UK. So added to me with a different accent and a uniform that actually, a skirt that went down to my knees and a tie that was all the way down to my belly button.
Yeah.
I was then put up a year. So I skipped year 7 and went into year 8. So my initial experience of secondary school was one of being horrifically bullied. And I absolutely initially hated it.
Mm.
So that wasn't so positive, but it ended up being very positive because it was a sink or swim situation, and I had to get a little bit more worldly wise quite quickly, and defend all those comments about students saying things like, did you kill your supper, and did you live in a tent, and why aren't you black, and just those sorts of misconceptions or ideas that you don't think of, or I didn't think of when I came to England, that those very regressive sort of racist ideas would have affected me as a white middle class girl. But that I then actually moved schools because it was so bad, and it was really badly affecting my mental health and my well-being. And so I moved into a smaller school where I really did thrive. I found my niche, and I had a lot more confidence then in myself, in realizing that I could teach myself how to learn in a way that helped me to make friends and also please the adults around me. Now, all of that I now understand a lot better in retrospect, having had a recent ADHD diagnosis. There's a lot of talk about that now in the media, and certainly on LinkedIn, where more older females are being diagnosed. So now I'm able to look back at my secondary and my primary school and realize that, even school reports that staring out the window or not paying attention, or she could do better if she tried, all of that was, or we now are far better at understanding that those are symptoms of ADHD in girls, that aren't the typical things that we see in boys. But I think it really, really made my schooling a lot more challenging and traumatic than it should have been or could have been. So
I'm intrigued by something you said there, actually, about how you taught yourself to learn in a way that you get to have friends and please the teachers. What was that? How did that work for you?
So something that I really struggled with was to sit still in class and focus on what the teacher was saying, and that the way of schooling then, starting to sound really old. I turn 40 next year, but I feel like, it's like whenever you go on to sites these days and have to put in your birth date and you have to scroll really far. I'm getting that bit. I feel like I'm saying, in the olden days, when we had to sit still and copy things off the board. But saying that, I now have 3 of my own children, and a lot of those techniques of teaching are still pervasive in schools these days, and it is still just as hard for most kids to learn from copying off the board. And so I missed a lot of like fundamental stuff in lessons, but there were very good revision books and things that I think my parents bought for me, or I was able to borrow from school, and realized that for a GCSE you could actually just learn the information outside of class. And whenever I did that, it made me feel so much more confident coming back into lessons or having to do exams. I remember failing most of my GCSE mock exams, and that being a real wake-up call for me, that I would either ace it or fail it. I wasn't like a middling sort of student, which is why teachers couldn't really understand me, or they'd say she can do it, or I didn't understand what was going wrong. But by the time I actually did the exams, I really wanted to prove that I could, and also in my mum at that point had been diagnosed with cancer. She was going through chemo in those final that exam stage. And I sort of thought that I needed to get really good grades for her.
Yeah.
Thankfully, she came through it, and she is still now healthy and
Yeah.
recovered. But at that time, when I put my mind to it and I hyper focused, I realized I could do it, and I came out with straight A's and A stars. And that gave me a level of confidence that in my abilities, but it also weirdly made me feel like a total and utter imposter, because I hadn't learned in the same way as everybody else. And I also immediately forgot all of the information that I had learned
Yeah.
that I'd crammed for. So I didn't even know if I had cheated somehow the system.
Right.
But I certainly knew that I had played the system, and I had found the patterns or the loopholes in what questions were going to come up and how you answered them. So I played the game, but I hated the system, and I hated how it made me feel. And I lost a lot of weight doing it. I remember self-harming, and it being a hugely traumatic experience.
Yeah.
And yet then coming out with, one of the best grades in the school. I remember being interviewed for the local newspaper and like all this crazy stuff, but thinking, okay, well, that's great, that's rewarding, but also deeply feeling like that surely there was another way for childhood to be.
Wow. I mean, that's a huge amount of pressure to be placed under and to put yourself under. Goodness
Well,
me.
I think that was it. It was me putting myself under that pressure in one way, but also very much, my parents having moved my brother and I to the UK for the opportunity for university, for the best universities.
Right.
And their goals for me very much being around, their tick of success for parenthood was getting me through the system and getting me a degree, because then it's like, I've done my job, I've been a good parent.
Wow. So having got your GCSEs out the way, what did you do next then? Did you think, oh, I'd like to do some more of this? Can I have some A levels, please?
Well, I think I did, and I think there is a huge jump, isn't there, from GCSE to A level. Now I think something that I did have that I taught myself was how to independently study, which is something that is really hard for students to go to that leap. So I knew I could do that bit, but then I remember choosing subjects that my parents very much wanted me to take. So choosing A-level maths was definitely not for me. And having to give that up, I did eventually admit failure on that. I was having nightmares and I think it was only when I was in my late 20s that I stopped having nightmares about maths exams.
Wow.
So when I knew my favorite subject was geography. I loved travel and learning about the world, and ironically, being in South Africa, I'd learned more about British history and the UK, and still quite colonial, even though it's fairly recently. I mean, I only left in 96, and that was only just the end of apartheid, and that whole thing. So I think it's sometimes we forget how recently the world has begun to change and take on really big new ideas. So yeah, I think it was just a lot to take in at A level, and to realize that I should choose the things that I really wanted to do. But A level burnt me out a lot. I wish I had taken a gap year. I wish I'd had some more time to think about what I really wanted out of my studies, because I knew I had the potential to really enjoy them. But I felt like I was being pushed through a system.
Sausage machine. So you did geography A level, and
So I ended
did
up
you?
doing
Mhm.
history, geography. I switched the maths to biology, which was very
Yeah,
much better for me.
yeah.
And I also did German.
Okay.
Um,
Well, so again, not, to take three, I think, I mean, to do three or four, four is a lot to do at A level.
yes, so I was in that year, if you remember, when they were experimenting for the first time with AS levels.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
that allowed, because I'd only switched the maths halfway through, my biology was
Ah,
a half an A level or an AS level.
right. Okay. And what did you do with those A levels, AS level? Did you have a gap year? Did you have a year off?
No, I did not. Yeah, my parents were very adamant that I go to university, and I, because neither of my parents had gone to university,
Mhm.
they were happy with me not doing anything at uni, but I conceded that if I could do geography at university, then
Yeah,
that would give me, a broad range of skills. It's the humanities and the
yeah,
sciences, and
yeah.
I did a BSc in geography,
Mhm.
um, initially at Exeter University.
Mhm.
Um, but my other downfall was that I had fallen in love with my first boyfriend, who
Yeah,
I had met at age 15,
yeah,
who then emigrated to Australia. So all I wanted to do was go to Australia.
yeah.
And to keep my parents happy, I had to do this degree before I was allowed to leave. so,
My
so I ended
goodness.
up swapping from or transferring from Exeter University to Southampton University,
Mhm.
and saving all my money, not engaging in university life at all because
Yeah,
I just studied as hard as I possibly could.
yeah.
Um, and again, that's a big regret I have, because lots of people talk about when you do go to university, it's one of the most amazing experiences, and it's about growing up and having fun and finding
Mm.
yourself and all of that, which I don't think I necessarily took um,
Mhm.
part in as much as I could have.
Wow. So no partying, no.
No, in fact, the the last exam that I took, the night before it, I went to see an artist in London play.
Yeah,
It was Tori Amos, for the record. And
yeah, yeah. Cornflake girl. Yes.
yeah, yes, that's right.
Yeah,
And ended up getting back home at about 3 o'clock in the morning, having a couple of hours sleep and writing my final exam.
yeah.
And I got the highest mark I'd ever gotten on an exam paper at
Wow.
university, which sort of made me feel like, oh, for goodness sake, maybe if I just chill out and enjoy and let my brain do its weird thing, then that's okay, rather than worrying so much about exams.
Wow. Okay. So you get your degree, you go to Australia. What happens
Yes,
next? Did
so
you did? Yeah.
I did,
Wow.
yes. I came
Yeah.
out with a first class degree in
Yeah.
geography,
Mm-hmm.
with honours or whatever. And I left to go to Australia the day after my 21st birthday.
Right.
Um, and what was so interesting, upsetting, surprising, was going to Australia and then saying, look, I've done everything I should have done right,
Yeah.
and I've got straight A's and I've got a first class degree, and then getting my first job, which uh, the company that I worked for took a chance on me because I was on a working holiday visa,
Mm-hmm.
and so I could be paid very little and just sort of see where it went. But
Yeah.
they didn't understand or recognize my qualifications, because in Australia, their end of school exams are,
Yeah.
you come out with a number, and
Right.
although Southampton is a Russell Group university, they didn't really know what that was about. So I still found myself starting at the bottom and making tea and trying to
Yeah.
prove my worth and my value.
Yeah.
And I think that, for me and where I've ended up, the being able to see globally the importance of education, being more about the people you meet, the skills you learn, and the guts you get inside you, is way more than the transcript or the piece of paper that you kind of hold.
Yeah. And do you know, it's interesting just that the points that you kind of raise there, because I've got a number of my friends are from South Africa and who talk about matriculation. I think, I don't know what that means. What does
Yeah.
that mean? What does it mean?
So it's pretty much your end of A levels. That's what it is.
Right.
It's the end of school. Matric is your final exams. So unlike the UK where you kind of end at GCSE and then you end again at A level, it's you have to go all the way through and then you go to university.
But they've had, similar to you with your Australia experience, they've done their education in South Africa, come to the UK, raising their families, applying for jobs where the employers go, we don't even know what this qualification is, and having to take like really basic maths and English exams for certain like parts of the NHS and things like that. And I wonder if, and I guess I probably know the answer to this, but so you've gone through the UK process and did that, as you say. I went and got a degree. I got a first class degree, which should be but then you go to Australia and they go, well, we don't know what that is. I mean, did you have any idea that might happen?
Well, no, but I was very excited to just be, young and enthusiastic and finally free in Australia to start a career and see what I could do or was capable of. And actually very shortly into my career, the founder of the startup that I was working with had offered to sponsor me to do an MBA.
Okay.
And
oh my God. Yeah.
Which actually kind of excited me because with that you have to use a real case study, and because the company was a young startup, it was a chance to use that and develop that company kind of in that space. And that also really inspired me because the way he was able to mentor and support young people in a startup business. So I think there was 5 graduates that he employed to do things. He knew that we were enthusiastic, you were willing to work for no money, just loved being part of something big and exciting. And in fact, that's kind of how we started with Gaia, actually recruiting young, recently graduated, or students. We recruited some students through the Kickstart scheme, which is where they're more vulnerable to not being eligible for meaningful employment for whatever reason. And they've been the best way to kickstart a small company because it's just young, excited talent. And but I think I was willing to start from the bottom. I think you are when you get into the big real world of work. What was most surprising actually after that, and then I worked for Ernst & Young for a while before having my first child, and then taking some time out of the workplace and then coming back to England and having to start again because I then, although I had my maths and English GCSE I retrained to be a teacher, and that's another industry where you've got to go back to your GCSE maths and English.
Right.
But in that instance, I didn't have the local work experience and local references. So again, I had to start all the way back from the bottom. And to me, that's highlighted so much, when they say gender inequality, and often people challenge that and say, no, we've progressed so much and in the UK and there is so much more equality. But I've seen, even from a privileged starting point, from good schools and opportunities to travel, that we're knocked back so much and so often in ways that the system doesn't account for.
Yeah. Well, as just before we hit record, talking to Lizzie about I had seen Barbie last night, and there's plenty about that in it.
Okay.
But you kind of brought us neatly, actually, to, you said you trained as a teacher. How did, because we should talk about Gaia now, I think. How did Gaia come to life, which would be given, we spoke a little bit previously about Gaia theory, and let's talk about that, how it came into being, what it means to you, and how your experiences have shaped this really special school that you've created.
Well, I think it went back to my initial love of geography. Like whenever I come back to, who am I, what's really important, what are my key values, it is the planet, the Earth. I don't think there's any point in education, in learning anything, unless it is to learn how to live sustainably on our planet for the future of our children. And so Gaia learning was inspired by the Gaia hypothesis, which is an Earth systems theory that suggests that the Earth would, if left to its own devices, just naturally be in balance and harmony with all of the organic and inorganic components of it just self-regulating. So applied to education, where children and parents and teachers educators have got control over their education, they've got agency, the whole system balances. I think we've gone wrong because of top-down government policy, exams, the system that we play and oppress children by to keep what is essentially this colonial factory, everybody around the world all learning the same thing for the same factory jobs at the end of the day. If we can, so my inorganic component is technology. So using the internet, using online classrooms, global communities, we can give back that power to the children who are the ones in the system suffering through it or enjoying it or whatever, to actually say what they need. And there is so much that, look back to myself as an 11-year-old, and I now have a 10, 12 and a 14-year-old. They are so acutely aware of what the issues are that the world is facing right now. And they are worried about climate. I took my kids to Greece last week, and we were watching the news every day in the run up to it, whether it would be cancelled because of the fires. And you come back to British summertime and it's, pouring with rain. I think that's probably been a constant. But there's climate anxiety that kids feel and worry about. And then they're just being asked to repeat these increasingly meaningless exams and be funneled through, as you said, the sausage system. And they are, like I felt all those years ago, their mental well-being is suffering hugely. And this isn't just neurodivergent students, it is everybody, but neurodivergent kids are like the canaries in the mine who are actually keeling over and saying, I can't do this. They are traumatized, not going to school. In a lot of cases, to the point of feeling suicidal. We hear parents, having to take their kids out of school, home educating, not by choice, but because it is the only thing they can see that they can do to support their kids through a crisis. And obviously this has all been exacerbated by COVID, and it's not natural for teenagers and kids developing in a social, as a social species, to have been locked away for all of that time. So we don't even know what the long-term effects are, but we can very, very clearly see. I speak to parents every single day where I can anecdotally hear that this is a huge issue. Um, my personal need and desire to create Gaia actually came before the pandemic, when my youngest son couldn't thrive in school. And it started from preschool, where he'd just physically make himself sick being there, to by the time he was in reception in year 1, physically escaping the school grounds and running home to me. He just couldn't thrive where there were so many kids, so many sensory inputs, so many instructions to do things. And I think a bit like me, would mask so hard in the time that he was in school, to, you know, the detriment of then coming home and just exploding with anger and rage. And it was a very, very difficult time and excruciating for me to see. And I remember doing the teacher, as part of my teacher training, finding out about ADHD and what the cure or the way to solve it or help kids was to medicate them in order to be able to thrive in school. And I remember being in this lecture theatre and crying my eyes out and saying, I can't believe that in this time where now I'm a parent, like the only way for me to help my kid feel good about himself at school would be to medicate him. And so I looked for alternatives, and he's very much more the classic ADHD boy profile that we think of. I often find him on the top of roofs or trees, or just keeping him alive has been a challenge. But if he can meaningfully move his body, and he's brilliant at any sport, or like martial arts, even ballet, but currently the thing is rugby and cricket. But if he's made to sit still, he just doesn't thrive. So I was able to get him into a private independent school where the class sizes were only 12. He had plenty of opportunity to move around and play sport. He was suddenly a hero, and, you know, winning all these awards and doing brilliantly. Unfortunately, I went through quite a traumatic divorce about 4 years ago, and as part of that, lost the ability to send him to that lovely school. But I knew that he needed that. So being able to have classes online where he could learn what he needed to learn, but then still have the time, the frequent breaks, and the flexibility to be outside in the world, learning and playing sport. Well, then again, he was good again. But now my child is not good or bad. He's himself. So the environment was so hugely important. And over the last 4 years, we've recognized that the majority of the students that come to us have ADHD diagnoses or are autistic. And it's not coincidence, but they do thrive where the learning is at their own pace. It's all around their interests that they can hyper-focus in on, and that, you know, gives parents that less anxiety, because they know that they're not alone in having to support their children in giving them the best education. Is what every parent wants to be able to do. We want to see our children thrive and be happy. So
and do you have I know you're quite a young, I guess, organization in terms of the split of boys and girls that come to you. Are you noticing any patterns there, or is it fairly balanced?
No, it's fairly balanced. But what we are noticing is the highest demand is in that year 6 to year 9 bracket. And especially the most popular group probably is the year 8. They've tried, like they've known the transition from primary to secondary is going to be traumatic for their kids, because they know that their children are different and need something else. But primary school is generally a lot more play-based and more active. I think we kind of start to ruin that in year 6 with the focus on sats and instilling that initial fear in kids about exams and making the school look good. I think that's a real shame at the end of primary school. But then a lot of parents do try the year 7, but that just comes with so many challenges for kids, with new uniforms, hugely busy corridors, changing lessons every time, changing in and out of uniforms several times a day for sometimes no apparent reason, and the knowing where to go, getting lost, all of the extra things that come with secondary school. And that's generally where parents will come to us and say, I just help. And they often don't know that there is an alternative. And right now we are the only alternative. We're the only online school specializing in supporting neurodivergent children, for that very reason.
And how does your kind of, because I mean, everyone that has kids will have like terrible memories of online schooling, because it was a farce. But people did their best. And I don't lay the blame at anyone's door, but it was just, I mean, it was a farce. And I was, fortunate that my children had their own devices. They have space to learn. But it wasn't anything remotely approaching learning most of the time. So how do you structure your offering so that it has that balance of what educators, parents, and pupils need?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think as much as people say to me, oh, you were at right place, right time setting up Gaia during COVID. COVID did so much damage for online learning because it was done so badly. We don't replicate school online. It is, and we have lots of kids transferring from traditional or these bigger online schools to us because they don't want death by PowerPoint. They don't want hundreds of kids online and, being on mute where the kids can just disengage. So we use virtual classroom technology that is specifically designed to be interactive and to facilitate human-centered communication, so that we have those small classes that I always dreamt of for my son, and don't ever go beyond 12 students in a class. Being able to feel known and seen and heard in a classroom. So we're also not a tuition business where lots of different educators do the learning. We operate like a school where it's joined up. We know all of the students. We know all of everything that's on their EHC plans. We take the time to get to know the parent and what they want and need, and we support parents as well. All of the lessons that we do are short because attention span, even like we know, and I think a lot of us learnt through COVID that we have increasingly short attention spans to learn anyway, but kids don't need hour-long lectures. They need short, interactive, active learning. So they are not sitting as passive recipients. They are engaged in moving and manipulating objects and the lesson content on the screen. They can change the font sizes, the background colors that might help with dyslexia, for example. Our breakout rooms work differently to Zoom, so we can support kids privately and they can have private communication with the teacher to feel heard and check their understanding before they want to share their information with the group. So that, like, reducing at every point that anxiety around learning. We have a flipped classroom, so parents and students can see what learning and what lessons are coming up. And so you don't like I felt in a classroom where it's like, oh, we're learning trigonometry today, but this is all big and this is new, and now my brain's gone blank and I'm not really taking it in. I'm going to close my eyes, hope nobody asks me any questions, and then I'll learn afterwards and come back to you. But by that time, the learning's moved on, and you didn't get to ask that question at the right time, so it's missed opportunities. And what we can do with technology now is check understanding so much more in the moment, respond to those learning opportunities as they arise, and therefore not miss them, and also not bore children in having to sit there when actually they have got that concept, but now let's move on otherwise. We all know how easy it is, if you're not interested, to just shut the laptop or walk away, or sorry miss, I can't hear you, on mute.
How do you train your teachers? This sounds like a very different way of leading classes.
Yes, glad you asked. We've recently launched actually the Gaia Academy, and earlier this year ran our first cohort of a course called How to Teach Inclusively Online, which was open to our own team, but also anybody working with students in a digital environment. Or because we partner with schools, often classroom teachers need to have a better understanding of what is possible online and what analytics and progress data we are able to collect on students so that we can work together. And I think it is that demystifying and making it non-competitive between all stakeholders of a child's education, so that we can reimagine, not reinvent school. So we're really innovating how it works online. And like you were saying, the torture of online school during COVID, there is no need to print out extra resources. The classroom is accessed in one click, in one browser. There's, it's reducing that cognitive load for parents and students, so that the best thing about, and the way we know we're getting good, is that as brilliant and futuristic as the tech is that we're using, it's when it becomes invisible and the only thing that's left is communication, human face-to-face interaction is left. That's when you know it's working, it's rebalancing.
And there's so many questions I want to ask. So you have, and help me if I've got this wrong, official school accredited status. Have I got that right?
So what has happened, I think, over the last 4 years is the whole concept of school is changing, and governments and ministries of education around the world are very quickly having to catch up to redefine and rework policies to work out what is an online school and how does it operate. So we were one of the first online schools to be accredited by Cambridge International. So we offer the Cambridge International curriculum online, as do over 10,000 other physical schools around the world, and a growing but small number of online schools are able to do that as well. We also work with local authorities here in England, where we are slowly making our way around the country to go through individual local authority accreditation processes, which allow us to be listed as recognised alternative provision for students. And that is really important because we want to showcase our safeguarding and our online security and our virtual classrooms, because it is a very, by its very nature, because it can be global, there are a lot of these schools popping up, and people, you know,
Mm.
every now and then we're like, oh, there's a new one, there's a new one. But
Yeah.
this for us is not a, you know, quick get rich quick scheme. This is born out of that pain from parent, teacher, and child perspective and mother perspective on
Yeah.
what can inclusive, flexible learning look like that
Mm-hmm.
is future proof, but is also future. It's going to work for everybody around the world. I want to really showcase how this can break down prejudices and misunderstandings between nations, and
Yeah.
for all our learning to be joined up in a way that we can celebrate it in digital portfolios, whether we're working or starting our careers in Australia or
Yeah.
South Africa or England or America.
Wow. I mean, that's big stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, go big or go home.
Yeah, but it's quite well, like you say, if at what age do you support students until?
Well, so we start from age 8 and
Mhm.
currently go all the way up to 19.
Yeah.
And we have in the pipeline plans to support apprenticeships as well into different future career paths, because that is something that certainly neurodivergent students are being forgotten in.
Yeah.
And often just because you don't thrive in a traditional school setting and they can't get the evidence to show that you might be good for whatever apprenticeships are available, what we're showing, and actually the talent pool I'm trying to recruit from, I'm looking for those people who think differently. I'm looking for people who thrive in different settings.
Yeah.
And I think increasingly that is what more and more employers are going to want and need.
Yeah, it's funny it sort of made me, because something I'm curious about actually is that, as you say, when you're helping young people and children that are neurodivergent and helping them to access education in a way that works for them, what then happens when and the working world has changed as well. It has. So, but I think you raise a really interesting point there on what happens next. Yeah, it's just you can't just be shoved out the door and said, right, go and figure that next bit of your life out.
Well, I would argue that actually we're preparing students more for what the reality of the workplace is now than ever before. I think that the students who don't learn online are going to be more disadvantaged than those who do. When COVID happened and we all changed the way we work, you're in a co-working space today. I'm at home.
Yeah.
We work in a hybrid way. We sometimes I work in a co-working space. Sometimes I'm at home. Sometimes I'm upstairs. Sometimes I'm literally in the boot of my car while my kids are on the beach and I'm in a meeting or teaching something. So those skills, the ability to use tech and connect wherever you are, to establish yourself in lots of different communities in different spaces, is the way that the world of work actually is. It is not, it's weird how after COVID, the workplace has moved on rapidly, but school, it didn't just go back to how it was. I feel in some ways it's gone back because I don't know, just it feels like governments and people are scared of what is out there. So it's go back to something that we knew was all right a very long time ago. And how do we get kids back into shape? We'll increase the discipline and increase behavior, penalties and things like that. Just seems really, really odd. So I know that when I recruit to expand my team, I'm always looking for people who are tech savvy, who can change and adapt easily, are flexible, can work with anybody, are resilient. And those skills, rather than that content, because there's no point in even saying, oh, I'm proficient in Microsoft Office and Google Workspace. Like, that is changing so fast. And there's the way we're incorporating AI and personalizing our resources using ChatGPT, and we're learning together, and we're pushing ourselves onwards. And very, very quickly, universities and traditional institutions are going to find themselves obsolete.
And I think actually when we were preparing for this session, I know certainly for some degree courses in subjects like media or computer science, as you say, if you're there for 4 years, well, the world has moved on. It's you've missed out on everything that's been happening concurrent with the materials you have that are based on literature that's out of date.
Absolutely. I can't even tell you how, even in the last 6 months, the platforms that we were using, that we had invested in, that we built stuff on, we've had to adapt or really quite actually quickly move away from. It's moving so fast, so quickly. And unless you have retained, which everybody has as a kid, that curiosity and a desire to learn and live and survive, it's that bit that gets quashed in schools. So that's what we need out of our young people that are coming into the workforce now, is just that optimism and just a curiosity to figure it out, or to ask a friend, learn together. Everything you ever wanted to know is on the internet. There's a forum, there is something, there is a code that it.
Wow. So what's next then? I mean, a global learning platform, take yourself anywhere. What's coming up with Gaia? Where's it going to go?
Oh, it's exciting. In fact, where is it going to go? So I just went on a holiday break with my business partner, and we were walking along the beach and looked at our daughters walking ahead of us in the waves, and they were holding hands. And I said to her, I would like to, in the next couple of years, take my kids out of school again and go around the world. And she looked at me and she went, what do you mean, go Gaia? And so we're like, yes, go Gaia. So that is a concept I very much would like to realize with my children. I know from my own experience that having lived in different countries when I was younger really changes your attitude and experience of the world. And I would like to give them that chance to see the world, because very much that is what I always, initially out of quite a traumatic, very difficult situation in leaving a not good marriage, I wanted flexibility, I wanted freedom, I wanted to run away. Now that things are going really well with the school, and we're growing, we're scaling, I've hired a head of learning who starts with us in September, and essentially replaces that role that I had in a lot of the day-to-day teaching, curriculum design, and managing our educators, which is allowing me to see bigger opportunities, but also come right back down to my own well-being. And the reason why I set it up in the first place was so that I wouldn't ever feel trapped or squeezed into that factory machine, whether that's things that are expected of you, universities, marriages. Because unless you see somebody else doing those things, you don't think it's possible, and you feel like you just have to carry on the way everyone else is carrying on. But I think it only needs a few of us to go, wait, why?
Yeah.
And the businesses that we are now partnering with and collaborating with have all been set up with that mindset of just what might be possible. And I think we only know when we actually get out there and try.
Wow. It's just, you know, very, very inspiring. And as you say, you've worked through some incredible challenges and difficult situations and are building this phenomenal platform. Where can people find out more?
It would be great if you visit our website, which is www.gaialearning.co.uk. That's GAIA, gaialearning.co.uk. All the information is on there. We still have places for this September, and lots more exciting things to announce in the next couple of weeks. So yeah.
It's fantastic. Well, thank you for giving me a little bit of your time today, and I'm sure we'll be back in a year's time to find out at least where in the world you are.
I would love that. I would love to go Gaia and
Go Gaia.
report back.
Thank you, Kirstin.
Thanks for having me.